Leadership Academy, India's top coaching institution for civil services preparation. Join us online to get most enriching experience from best faculty with excellent notes and specially designed courses. To join the batch, download Nandipayas Academy app from Google Play Store. For more information, contact 9511 280 465.
Hello everybody, welcome you all again. Now we are entering into the last phase of Karl Marx, or last phase of revolution of this chapter. The chapter is called as, the topic is called as class struggle in our official syllabus. Earlier we are done with the three concepts and many surrounding and background concepts related to those proper concepts. The first was historical materialism, second was mode of production, and third was alienation, right? And if you can observe, there is an organic link between all these concepts. Unless until you are thorough with historical materialism, you won't get what MOP or the mode of production is. Unless until you are thorough with the concept of alienation, you won't get the idea of class struggle. Right? And as we have already talked about the concept of alienation in the last session, it was a socio-psychological feeling of detachment, isolation, entrenchment, right? From the production process, from the produce, from society, and in the end, from the self. The alienation, the feeling percolates into the self of that individual, such that the individual starts questioning his own existence. The individual starts questioning the very purpose of his life. And according to Marx, that fourth stage, the feeling of alienation, is the feeling that triggers the actual class conflict and class struggle. That we are going to start in this session today. But before we start the topic of class struggle, we must be thorough with the idea of what is a class. According to Marx, a class. A class is a group of people. In its simplistic understanding, a class is a group of people. But as you know, Marx is a materialistic social thinker, or his ideas are based on the concept of materialism. He attaches the economic conception, material conception, to definition of a class. And that's how he expands the definition of a class beyond just a group of people. And he adds few other words to that definition, such that a class is a group of people which has the same relationship with the modes of production. Or means of production, by the way. What is means of production? It is a factor. There is difference between mode and means. Means of production is factor of production. Let's talk about it again. According to Marx, a class is a group of people. A class is a group of people which has a similar relationship with the factors of production. Similar relationship with the factors of production. Once again, a class is a group. A class is a group which has a group which has similar relationship with the factors of production. Marx termed this relationship in terms of ownership over the factors of production. Marx termed this relationship as the ownership being the criteria to define that relationship of production. Ownership, right? Those who own the factors of production, they will form a group. And those who don't own the factors of production, they will form another group. Can you recall this triangle? The famous triangle, right? It is a structure of society, pyramidal structure of society, where very few people in the society, they dominate, they control the economic and political structures of the society. They are called as bourgeois according to Marx, and the rest of them are called as the proletariats. Right? So this is bourgeois class. And this is proletariat class. You getting me? Now the bourgeois class, ज्याला आपण capitalists पण म्हणू शकतो, the capitalists and the proletariat, the workers, the laborers. The bourgeois class is also called as the haves, the haves and the proletariats are also called as the have-nots. Why they are called as haves and have-nots? Because they either own the factors of production or don't own the factors of production. The capitalist class, the bourgeois class or the haves class is a group of people. It is a group of people, right? The capitalist, it is a class, right? A class, right? It is a group of people who belong to this position and who own the factors of production. Okay, so what is the criteria? Is the ownership of the factors of production. In a society, a group who owns the factors of production, they are called as the bourgeois class, the haves class, the capitalist class. And that's how a class is nothing but a group. And those who don't own the factors of production, that means those who don't own the factories, the tools, machines, the production processes, assembly lines, the raw material, everything. Those who don't own these things, they are called as the have-nots. Marx termed technically them as proletariat, the proletariat class, the have-nots class, the labor class. They don't own, as they don't own the factors of production, they form the another group who don't own, and one group who own. Okay, the haves, the have-nots, and that's how, according to Marx, a class is a group of people who has similar relationship with the factors of production in terms of ownership or non-ownership. That relationship based on the criteria of ownership. Those who own form a group, those who don't own form another group. I hope you are clear with the definition of Marx or the class according to Marx. So, what is a class? Okay. To define with, you can write that definition even. A class is a group of people who have the similar relationship with the factors of production. And that factors of production, the relationship is termed in, you can say, in terms of the ownership over the factors of production. And that's how, according to Marx, in a society, there are two groups, two classes, the haves and the have-nots. But the particular word, that is the capitalists and the labor class, the bourgeois and the proletariat, is particular to the capitalist mode of production. Throughout the history, the society has progressed from one mode of production to another. The society started its journey with the most primitive mode of production. That mode of production is called as the primitive communism, right? As we discussed in the the second topic of our syllabus, that is the mode of production. What is a mode of production? It is a stage in the development or the progress of the society. Right? Currently now we are in capitalism or capitalist mode of production, but we were not in capitalism from its entirety from the, you can say, the time immemorial, right? We started our journey or the society journey with the primitive communism. Then we moved to another second stage that is called as what? That is called as the ancient society, ancient slave society. Or ancient mode of production, okay? Then thirdly, we move towards the feudal mode of production, and now currently we are in the capitalist mode of production, and Marx has also predicted for future mode of production, that is socialistic and communism. We won't discuss that for now. Okay, now we are in nothing but the capitalist mode of production, where the class, that is a group of people, is technically called as the bourgeois proletariat class. Bourgeois proletariats. Okay, bourgeois and proletariats. In feudal mode of production, that those classes were feuds or feudal lords and serfs. So when we were in the feudal society, feudal mode of production, the haves were the feudal lords and the have-nots were the serfs. Just like in today's society, capitalist society, the haves are bourgeois class and have-nots are the proletariat class. Just like that, in ancient society, the haves were the masters and the have-nots were the slaves. And in primitive communism, there was no class distinction. Okay, no class. It started from the ancient slave society. Classes, right? The class distinction. It started from the ancient society, where the masters and slaves were the haves and have-nots respectively, where the feudal lords and the serfs were the haves and have-nots respectively. And in the fourth stage, that is the capitalism, that is the today's stage in Indian society or the global society, is bourgeois and proletariat classes. Right? Now, while we are moving towards further discussion, let's take help of the previous concept we discussed, that is alienation. In alienation, just a small pause here. We are going to link this topic to the next topic, that is class struggle. But before that, we are going to require a theoretical understanding of background of the topic of alienation. First of all, in alienation, we discussed that the graph of alienation is somewhat like this. Graph of alienation is somewhat like this, right? Where the alienation will reach at its peak in capitalist mode of production. It will be lower in feudal and likewise in ancient society. Or to talk in reverse direction, the quantum of alienation, will reach at its peak in the capitalist mode of production. And we also discussed that the alienation is of 4 stages. Alienation occurs in 4 stages. That is, firstly, the worker or the laborer will alienate from the produce, then the production process, then he will start alienating from the society at large, and lastly, the alienation concept or the alienation psychological concept will penetrate into his own being, that is alienation from self. According to Marx, the situation of alienation from self is the most dangerous. And all these societies, ancient slave, feudal and capitalist societies, experience some form of alienation, but in varying degrees. Okay, alienation denotes the concept called as contradictions. Contradiction, or you can call it as antagonism. According to Marx, you can observe here, in ancient slave society, the masters own the bodies of their slaves. The masters own the labor of the slaves, and the slaves won't get even a single penny for their work. Isn't it a contradiction? Why it is a contradiction? Because man by nature is a creative thing, a creative being. He produces out of creativity. But in ancient slave society, the masters now control the bodies and the labor of the slaves. And the exploitation starts from this society, right? And the labor or the slaves will lose their ownership over their own body. Now, that is nothing but a situation of contradiction. And as there is contradiction, what Marx famously calls about contradiction or quotes about contradiction, the contradiction is the motor of history. Contradiction drives the history. Contradiction again fuels the transformation of society from one mode of production to another mode of production. And that's how society transforms itself into another, the next mode of production, where the next mode of production will replace the earlier one, and now the society will enter into the feudal mode of production. Why? Because of the inherent contradictions, the contradictions in the ancient society, right? Then it will enter into the feudal mode of production. In feudal mode of production, the feudal lords, those who own the lands, will control the labor of the serfs, will control the labor of the cultivators, tillers. They will work on their fields or the fields of the feudal lords for, let's say, a meager wages. They will work for long hours. They will work for, let's say, and that's how the exploitation amount will somewhat will increase, and the alienation will also increase. And some amount of class struggle or some amount of, let's say, a conflict will start arising, but that conflict is not of that level or not of that peak, or the contradictions or antagonism or alienation is not yet at peak. And that's how the society without class struggle and revolution, will transform into the next phase. But of course it will transform into the next phase. Why? Because there are contradictions. And whenever there are contradictions, whenever there is antagonism, whenever there is dialectics, the society automatically transforms or changes its own mode of production. And now society enters into the next mode of production, that is called as the capitalistic mode of production, where again the classes are present just like these two societies. In ancient society, we had the classes called as the masters and slaves. In feudal society, we had the classes like serfs and feudal lords, or feudal lords on the top and serfs. Now the feudal lords will be replaced with a new name, that is called as the capitalists, the industrialists, the bourgeois class, or the haves. and the labor class will be now named as nothing but the proletariat, the have-nots, who used to be serfs in the feudal societies. Are you getting me? But there is one difference. That difference in the class structure of the capitalist society we will discuss now. We just first, until now, clear the idea of what a class is. Since when we are observing the class system or class structure, what is its origin? By the way, yes, what is its origin? It is a natural question. How class emerged? After communism or the primitive communism, when we used to have the common ownership on all the factors of production, startly man by nature is a very greedy person, right? A greedy creature. And out of that, man started accumulating some wealth, some surplus, and those who owned the surplus, they belong to a ruling class, master's class, or let's say, for example, feudal lords or capitalists. Those who owned the surplus, those who accumulated the wealth, those who owned the property and everything, they now be called as the haves, and those who were, you can say, detached from, those who were kept apart from the property, the factors of production, now they are being called as the have-nots, or slaves, or serfs, or laborers. So what is the origin of class system? It has to do with the accumulation of surplus and all these things. Class structure is a historical phenomenon, but the class structure has very distinct and peculiar features in capitalism. Now we are going to discuss that. We'll write it as the class structure in capitalism. According to Marx, the class structure in capitalism is very much distinctly organized. Firstly, he recognized that instead of having only two classes, the class structure in capitalism is arranged in a tri-layer format. Initially, the journey of capitalist mode of production starts with a tri-layer format, where the first layer of the society structure is, of course, a bourgeois layer. The second layer is petty bourgeois. And third is nothing but proletariats. It's just similar to the middle class, right? What we observe today. We have bourgeois class, proletariat class, and is somewhat one particular layer between them is called as petty bourgeois, which can be identified or resembled with the middle classes. It is the start of capitalism. It is just after the feudalism, right? When the feudalism crumbles down and we slowly enter into capitalism, the capitalism starts its journey with three classes. But when capitalism starts maturing, slowly and gradually, the middle layer, that is the petty bourgeois layer, starts disappearing. The petty bourgeois layer starts disappearing. Few members of the petty bourgeois layer, I'm talking about with the you can say passage of time, maturity of capitalism. With this phase, few members of petty bourgeois layer will start shifting themselves into the bourgeois layer. Few members of the petty bourgeois layer will accumulate more wealth, they will get more incomes, they will have more property, and automatically their class will change and they will move towards the uppermost layer, that is bourgeois layer. Few of them, right? This process is called as bourgeoisization, according to Marx. And at the same time, many or few members of the second layer, the middle layer, will find their place in the third layer, that is the proletarian level, right? Because of poverty, misfortunes, losses in their business, deteriorating lifestyles, and many other reasons, they will start downgrading, right? They will start losing their status, positions, and somehow they will end up into the last layer, that is called as proletariat level, and this is called as proletarianization. Spellings are somehow right? Proletarianization, at the same time bourgeoisization, right? That is called as the process of bourgeoisization and proletarianization. With the few reasons, few will get position into the uppermost layer and few will get position into the last layer, that is the proletarian level. But over the period of time, as the members shift their locations, nobody is remaining here now. Either they become very rich or very poor. Either they become very rich or very poor. And automatically, this structure will look somewhat like this. Okay? Okay, so you are okay with this? And finally, the structure will somewhat look like this, where we will have only two layers in society now. Over the period of time, with the maturity of capitalism, when the capitalism started its journey as a mode of production, it started with three-layer format. Now, with the process of bourgeoisization and proletarianization, the middle layer gets disappeared, and the society organized itself into a two-layer format, where the first layer, the most powerful, the most rich of them, a group of people, this class is called as the bourgeois class, and this class, the remaining, is called as the proletariat class, which we called as the haves or have-nots, the capitalists or the labor class. This process is called as class polarization. This process is called as class polarization. The classes get polarized. Earlier, it used to be a three-layer format. Now, it has polarized themselves into two classes. Polarized in the format that they have diametrically opposite features. They will be super rich. They will be super poor. They will enjoy the lives in luxury. They will get exploited. They will own the factors of production. the P or the proletariat will not own the factors of production. And as they don't own any factors of production, they have no other than to sell their own labor. They have nothing to, you can say, sell. They have nothing on the basis of which they can earn money, they live their life, than to sell their labors. And that's how, out of compulsion, the proletariat class, the P class, starts selling their labor. Why they sell their labor? They have no ownership on the factors of production. They have nothing. They can be called, it can be called as the ownership. They have nothing than the labor. They have to work in the factories. And that's how, for the sake of money or to live life, they sell their labor. Okay, this process where the social structure rearranges itself into a two-layer format which are typically diametrically opposite to each other is called as the process of class polarization. Now, the process of through this process of class polarization, two classes are now formed. Two classes are formed. Two classes are at least formed now. Now what happens to this? Okay. Now let's continue with this diagram again. After class polarization, the first class, that is called as the bourgeois class, will start owning the factors of production. They will control the economic decision, the political decisions, everything. The production process will be dominated by the bourgeois class. Their dominance on the production process is established. And now slowly, exploitation naturally is increased. The bourgeois class, they know that they own the factors of production. At the same time, the individuals in the proletariat class, they know that we are laborers. They know that, or the individuals know that we are the laborers. They have the objective awareness about their own conditions. They know that, yes, of course, we belong to a labor class. That is objective feeling. What Marx call it as the class in itself concept. Okay, the concept is called as the class in itself. According to Marx, the class in itself is awareness about their individual situation. Bourgeois know that they are the owners. Okay, I am the owner, and one particular individual or labor class will know that I am a laborer. I have to wake up early in the morning, get the public transport, and go to the factory, work for long hours, then come back again, have dinner with the family, then again in the morning, the same routine continues. And the bourgeois know that, yeah, of course, I will manage the work, I will earn the profits, and I will live a luxurious life. This is objective criteria of class identification. Objective criteria, just knowing I am a laborer. But with the maturity of the capitalism, that capitalism is moving further, let's say a centuries ahead or decades ahead, and the capitalism is maturing itself. More and more class polarization is going on, and that's how more and more control over the factors of production is going on the part of the bourgeois class, and that's how it is leading to exploitation and alienation on the part of the workers. And that's how, with the maturity of capitalism, what we are observing in capitalism itself, alienation and exploitation will increase. Alienation and exploitation will increase. Now, one point comes in the progress of capitalism towards somewhat near to its maturity, the exploitation and alienation, the exploitation by the capitalist class of the labor class, right? Exploitation and alienation will reach at its peak. That will be an unbearable situation, beyond which a dignified life or imagination of dignified life is not possible. The wages are so meager. The working hours are so long. The profits are so huge that the capitalist will have no place to place that money, to park that money. And that's how the exploitation and alienation will reach at its peak. And at this situation, according to Marx, the labor class will start gaining consciousness that we belong to a labor class. At the same time, I have many of the colleagues who also belong to labor class, and all of them, including me, are suffering out of the exploitation, alienation on the parts of the bourgeois class. What Marx treated or termed that condition as class for itself, a class for itself is nothing but a consciousness, a conscious feeling of awareness belonging to a particular class, that is called as proletariat class, where the individual will start consciousness or gaining consciousness that I am not alone in that class. There are many such individuals who are the victims of the capitalist mode of production, who are the victims of exploitation, who are the victims of the alienation process, and now we must join our hands together and to fight against the exploitation, alienation, and rise against the capitalistic mode of production, and that's how we must go for a revolution. That feeling of awareness, that feeling of consciousness, Marx called it as class for itself. The class in itself was just a feeling. The class in itself was just a feeling of having one identity of being in a labor class or bourgeois class, and that's it. That was an objective feeling. But when you can say the victims, that is the proletariat class, will start experiencing the heat of the exploitation, will start experiencing the, you can say, problems of the capitalist mode of production in the form of exploitation, poor wages and all, everything, they will start gaining subjective consciousness of their conditions, of their exploitation. They will now have no other option than to join their hands. The labor must unite and go for revolution. This idea is given by Marx in a technical sense, that is called as the class for itself. As we talked in the earlier sessions about alienation, the class for itself is triggered by alienation. When the alienation will reach at its peak, the alienation and the exploitation will trigger the class for itself feeling. It is a consciousness. Class consciousness, or you can say it has a class consciousness, and class consciousness is of two types according to Marx. One is subjective, another is objective. The objective class consciousness is called as class in itself, and the subjective class consciousness is called as class for itself. According to Marx, the subjective consciousness is very much important. If the revolution or for revolution to take place, according to Marx, the class for itself is the primary condition, is the necessary condition for revolution and class struggle. Are you getting me? What I'm talking about, or from where we reached to this point? We talked about what is a class. Is class particular to capitalism? No, there were classes present in the earlier modes of production, but there are certain distinct features with the class structure in capitalism, where in capitalism with the maturity, class polarization process takes place, through which the exploitation and any alienation will reach at its peak, and that's how the consciousness feeling of the class in itself will gradually get converted into class for itself consciousness. And let's discuss what is this class for itself consciousness and how it gets transformed into revolution. Now we are in a situation where the class for itself consciousness is taking place. Now in this situation, the class for itself situation or the consciousness the labor class are now aware of their conditions. The labor class are now aware that they are getting exploited. The labor class is now aware that the bourgeois class is gaining profits out of the labor of us. It is us who work in the factories for long hours. It is us who work for the factories for day and night. It is us who work for the production, and it is us who really produce. But who are the actual gainers of this produce? Who earn the profits? It is the bourgeois class. Who accumulate great wealth? It is bourgeois class. And in return, who exploits us again? It is the bourgeois class. This whole conceptual understanding of the system is now clear on the part of the labor class. And once they are clear with that conceptual understanding ki what is actually going on, that condition is called as the subjective condition, subjective consciousness, as class for itself consciousness. In this condition, the class for itself consciousness, relatively free laborers will start organizing labor movements. By the way, you will ask me what is meant by relatively free, or what is the freedom of the laborers. Yes, of course, they are free to join any company. Let's discuss about that even. For example, a labor class is working in a, let's say for example, A company, and he gets offer from B company. He is free to join that B company. And after a few months or years, he might get offer from a third company that is called as C, and he is again free to resign from B company and to join the C company. And likewise. And the decisions are completely taken by, of course, labor, the particular labor, individual labor, to join which company and which not to. But have you observed whether he joins A, B or C, he is again controlled by the same class. He is ruled by the same class, that is bourgeois class. A class is a group of people. All those companies will be owned by the same group of people, that is called as bourgeois. And anybody working in any company will belong to the same class or a same group of people called as proletariat. Either he works in A, B or C, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the owners of that company belong to bourgeois class. They are going to exploit that labor again. And whether he joins B or C or D company, he will again belong to the same class, that is proletariat class, which is going to be exploited by the bourgeois class. And that's how in society, if many companies and corporations are present, all those owners of all those corporations, hundreds of the corporations and MNCs are present today, but all those owners and all those, the managerial class will belong to the bourgeois group, and all those laborers working in all the factories, all the industries, all the MNCs throughout the world, throughout the globe will also, and of course, belong to the same class, that is called as proletariat class. So what is the change? No change, right? The same feeling is there, same class consciousness is there, same class for itself feeling is there, and either he joins B or C, the level of exploitation is not going to be changed, the level of alienation is not going to be changed. There is no condition, no situation whether he will improve his living standard or freedoms and all. No, we can say that relatively, we can say that, or it appears like he is free to join any company, but he is not completely free from the bourgeois class. So how can you say that he is free? He is free only to join a company B or C, but he is not free from the social structure. He is not free from the class structure. He is going to belong in the same class which he used to belong earlier, and he is going to be controlled by the same class which is called as bourgeois class, either he joins B or C. But there are few in this freedom criteria, relatively free laborers who are intellectually somewhat developed, who are somehow more aware of their condition than the other fellow members. And what they do, they start organizing labor movement. They start organizing, you can say, labor unions. They start mobilizing the laborers. They organize labor movements. They organize protests. They organize lectures. They organize seminars. They organize, you can say, awareness campaigns. And that's how they start mobilizing, they start uniting the rest of the labor class, who are relatively free labor among this proletarian class. The relatively free labor among the proletarian class. Let's say, for example, out of those lakhs of the laborers, 4 or 5 people are more intellectually developed, and they start organizing the labor class movement. We are talking about this situation. And now in this situation, after organizing this labor class, the worker class, the labor class, the proletarian class throughout the world, or at least a wider society, will start mobilizing itself, organizing itself on the lines of struggle. There will be no other option than struggle. Okay, and that's how the feeling of class for itself will transform into a class struggle, or what we can call it as a revolution. With this revolution or the class struggle, the capitalism as a mode of production will crumble down. The capitalism as a mode of production will get destabilized, will crumble down. And the labor class, which is now united because of this sense of or consciousness of class for itself, they will overthrow the bourgeois class. They will overthrow the capitalist mode of production. They will overthrow the capitalist government, the state, and they will start reorganizing the society on egalitarian lines, on the principles of equality, justice, freedom, liberty, fraternity. Are you getting me? all the labor class will unite, and that's how they will mobilize their resources. They will go for struggle against the capitalists. They will struggle against the haves. They will struggle against the bourgeois class. They will overthrow them. They will overpower them because of the class consciousness, which is subjective in nature now, which is class for itself. And that's how this is the point of the maturity of the capitalism, because according to Marx, the very foundation on which capitalism is based is contradictory. The very foundation on which capitalism is based is contradictory. How can a mode of production like this, how can and so injusticeful, you can say so inhuman, unequal mode of production can survive for long? How can we imagine the stabilization of capitalism? According to Marx, the seeds of destruction of capitalism are sowed in itself, by itself even. The seeds of destruction of capitalism are sowed by itself, because it is the capitalism who goes for polarization. It is the capitalism who goes for exploitation of the labor class. It is the capitalism because of which alienation is increasing to that level. It is the capitalist mode of production which makes bourgeois to accumulate wealth. And it is the capitalism or capitalistic mode of production which makes the conditions of the labor class petty, poor. And that's how, according to Marx, the seeds of destruction of capitalism are sowed by capitalism itself. And it is very much possible and natural that capitalism will crumble down, because it is inherently founded on contradictions. It is inherently founded on the foundation of exploitation and injustice. The labor are going to be united. The labor class is going to be united. The labor class is going to mobilize themselves. A labor class is going to organize themselves into labor class movements and labor unions, and labor class and the proletariat class, of course, is naturally going for revolution and class struggle. And that's how the idea of class struggle and alienation, along with historical materialism and modes of production, was a revolutionary vision on the parts of Marx, which gave the idea of society's past, present, and future. Through this idea of class struggle, Marx visioned for equal society, a society based on equality, egalitarian society, where the members of the society will own the factors of production on equal lines. Through this idea of class struggle, Marx predicted that the capitalism is going to crumble down. Through this idea of capitalism, Marx predicted that, or not prediction, he was sure about it. Marx inspired the labor class movements. Marx inspired the voiceless. Marx inspired the proletarian class to get organized, to get mobilized, to get united, and go for a revolution. This was that concept, class struggle. It was a systematic explanation of the society's past. It was systematic explanation of society's present, that is capitalism, and it was a systematic explanation of society's future. And that's how Marx envisioned that after capitalism, now the labor class will dominate the society. Now the labor class will dominate the factors of production. The bourgeois will be overthrown, overpowered. The labor class will own the factories. the labor class, the proletarian class will own the the means of production, that is the factors of production. That mode of production after capitalism is called as socialistic mode of production, which is just a transitory phase towards our end. What is the end of, what is going to be the end mode of production according to Marx? It is going to be the communistic or communist mode of production, where the ownership will be on egalitarian basis. Socialistic mode of production was just a transition from capitalism to the last phase, communism. And now in the socialistic mode of production, slowly and gradually, the labor class will start giving away their ownership over those factors of production. The labor class will naturally, peacefully, will start giving away their control and ownership over those factors of production, and now gradually a wider society will start gaining ownership and control over the factors of production. Now the society on its complete sense will own the factors of production and the, you can say, the material ownership. And that's how now the society will transform itself into the last mode of production. That mode of production will be called as the, communist mode of production, communism, where there will be no class, where there will be no state, where there will be no class called as bourgeois or labor, where there will be no exploitation, where there will be no accumulation of the surplus, where there will be no exploitation, accumulation, concentration of wealth. The society will live peacefully without any conflict and contradictions, and as there is no surplus and ownership, there won't be any contradictions. And as there are no contradictions, there is no question of changing mode of production henceforth. The situation of no contradiction will continue permanently, and the society won't require any struggle to get transformed into the next phase. And that's how, according to Marx, that will be the end phase, that will be the end mode of production, that will be the last mode of production where this society aspires to go. Right? Getting me how significant this idea was, the class struggle? So class struggle is nothing but when the class polarization reach at its peak, the proletarian class, out of the consciousness called as class for itself, mobilize itself and goes for revolution and conflicts. In many times it can be armed conflict, like we observed in Russia, many Latin American countries. Okay, this was about the class for itself. And technically, the end of the Marx syllabus for UPSC. But we are going to arrange one more session on this Marx topic as a critique to Marx. It is going to take another 30-40 minutes as the last phase of this topic, as a critique on Marx. Okay. Now I would like to conclude this session on the class conflict, the class struggle, and we'll meet soon with the next topic that is called as critique on Marx. Till then, I will thank you very much. We'll meet soon.
Nandip Academy, India's top coaching institution for civil services preparation. Join us online to get most enriching experience from best faculty with excellent notes and specially designed courses. To join the batch, download Nandipayas Academy app from Google Play Store. For more information, contact 9511 280 465.